So should you remove the DPF on your car? What's it doing to your performance is an important question that we get asked an awful lot. And what are the alternatives to actually removing it? Can you get performance variants, for example, and how do they work? And what other mods do you need to do to your engine to make everything work effectively? So legislators have insisted that manufacturers of modern diesel engines provide some kind of filter system just to stop those tiny particulates from getting out into the atmosphere. So as a result of that, it's often illegal in most areas and countries to remove the DPF filter itself. So why do people have trouble with the DPF filter? Well, firstly, in my opinion, it's sited too far away from the engine, so it's not getting up to its operating temperature. And the DPF filter does need to be warm. So while the engine is warming up and it's pushing out all of those sooty particulates that need to be dealt with, that's effectively just clogging up your DPF filter. So if you only ever do short journeys, you are going to have long-term problems with your DPF filter clogging up, and that is definitely going to restrict performance. You have to bear in mind as well that manufacturers have gone to great lengths to push out cars to meet a certain price point. And that means they don't put the resources into the small parts of the engine, particularly the DPF. They get cheaply made, bulk produced filters that do the job, but they're not that effective long term, and they are harming the performance of your car. So they're creating a restriction within the exhaust. How much of a restriction do you typically get from a DPF filter? Well, putting cars on the dyno, you generally see about 7% of a power gain just from removing the DPF filter. In older engines, you may well see bigger improvements removing the DPF. In newer engines, the DPFs are generally a little bit better designed and better sited, so there's less of a performance hit from them. But in all cases, you're putting something in the flow of the exhaust that is going to create a restriction. And that restriction gets progressively worse as the soot builds up, especially if it's not being burnt off with the DPF filter getting up temperature. So looking after your DPF, keeping it in good order is probably one of the easiest and best things you can do to just keep the performance of your car where it was intended to be. So that involves driving the car reasonably hard from time to time, making sure the engine gets up to those operating temperatures where the DPF can do its thing and burn off those soot particles. If you don't do that, you're just building up a problem that is going to become very expensive. So the ECU will generally detect the pressure before the DPF filter and afterwards. And if there's a big differential in those pressures, it will trigger some kind of regeneration cycle. It'll flash up a warning on the dashboard, and in severe cases it may even back off on the car's performance in order to protect itself and prevent further damage from happening. So can you remove the DPF? Well, as we've said, it's illegal to remove a DPF in most countries and most states, so you need to be very, very careful. If you're driving a car on the road that's not legal, you run the risk of your car being confiscated, impounded, destroyed or crushed. There's all sorts of risks of citations and legal action that can be taken against you as the owner of that vehicle. So it's really not worth the risk of taking the DPF out just for the small bump in performance that you will get. Are there alternatives though that you can employ? Well, thankfully companies have come along and they've created better designed DPFs. They're generally larger, they flow much better, they're more effective at burning off those soot particles. And in making this adjustment to the DPF and the way it's fitted to the car, most adopt the strategy of fitting it as close to the engine as possible, which is generally just after the turbo on the downpipe, where the DPF can reach its operating temperature much more easily than it would if it was sited further down the exhaust. So those sports alternatives are very well designed. A lot of research and development has gone in. They will use premium materials and structure to just ensure that it's an efficient system at dealing with those soot particles. And if you take your car out on the track at the weekends, but you still want to keep your car road legal during the week, it's probably a good idea to see if some kind of clamp system can be fitted to the exhaust where you can swap the DPF pipe for a straight pipe and take your car out on the track and then swap it back afterwards. It's not always possible in every different type of car, just the way that the engines are designed and ease of access to them. But it's a good option if you want the best of both worlds. You want to maximise your track time, but you don't want to render your car illegal on the roads. So the DPF is annoying. You can understand why people want to buy a car that doesn't have a DPF, particularly if they only do short journeys. And in some of the earlier models that had DPFs, the lower performance variants often didn't have a DPF. So they would appeal to the tuner because they can generally be taken up to the level of the performance variants, and you don't have all the associated hassles of DPFs and legalities of removing it. So there are sports alternatives. Do talk to your specialists in your area. If you're struggling to find an application, please drop in the comments what car you've got, what model you've got. Please let me know in the comments what your experience has been with DPF filters, whether you think they're a necessary evil or whether you should just do away with them, or whether manufacturers have done a really good job and they're no longer a problem. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts and your comments. That's how we get a rounded out experience. So I hope this video has been useful to you. Thanks for watching. Please stay tuned and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in the next video.